Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine, gaudete.
So welcome to another episode of the Rediscovery channel, where each time we look at a different topic that the other person hopefully hasn't heard about. My name is Stilgar, and I'm here with my good friend Ivor. And today it's my time. And Ivor, I want to talk to you about a group of people who you may or may not have heard about called the Redlegs. Does that tell you anything?
Rat legs?
Red, like RED, the color.
Okay. Red legs.
Yes.
No, I haven't heard.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to be talking about this group of people using an article that I found. It's actually an article from the New York Times, but from 1973. But it's the best information I could find that was all together. And not much has happened since. And I think a lot of it's better because it's a bit older, because the Redlegs are descendants of indentured servants, Irish indentured servants, that were shipped to Barbados for the most part back in the 1600s, all throughout the 1800s, to serve there and to basically to help with the English with their growing of sugarcane. So now, do you know anything about indentured servitude and
Yeah,
the
I mean
history of that? Hmm.
we had indentured servitude in the early English colonies that were here. Like people would agree to work for usually a plantation owner for a certain period of time without receiving wages. And the plantation owner would basically pay for their passage, and then they would work to pay it off. And a lot of times they didn't even survive to complete their work. And eventually it was done away with because the slave trade started up, and that was more efficient.
Yeah, yeah, and it's some people have used it to say, well, it's just as bad as slavery or not as bad as slavery, or and because people were talking about that, now it's become kind of like a hush thing that you don't talk about. But there's no reason to compare the two of them, because basically you can just look at just the indentured serfs and see what their lives were like, and they were just pretty horrible overall. And now I want to talk to you a bit about these people that are this small community that's still living on Barbados today. Um, and I'll be using this article about it because it goes a little bit further back in time, and because of that, I think it has a less biased view on their history. So throughout the British West Indies, the bottom rung of the socio-economic ladder is reserved for a group of poor, backward, and isolated whites, known generally as the Redlegs. They are the descendants of men, women, and children shipped to the Caribbean islands from Britain from the mid 1600s to the mid 1800s to work on the sugar plantations. Some came as slaves, losers in Protestant Catholic conflicts, debtors, and other conflicts of kidnapping victims. Others came as indentured servants, some willingly, some not. 70 years ago, a Caribbean tourist described their progeny as mean whites, not colonists fallen upon evil days, but colonists by compulsion who, for centuries, have enjoyed nothing but a heritage of woe. Today, the Redlegs, usually identified by complexions which seem almost bleach of all color, straw-like hair, and pale blue eyes, are pariahs in a subculture unto themselves, aloof from the environment and era. Through their roots in the Caribbean, though their roots in the Caribbean now go back 300 years, they have never assimilated. Pride in the color of their skin, considered a status symbol and a social asset in the West Indies until the rise of black consciousness has kept them from mixing with the descendants of black African slaves. Yet the white planter class never accepted them, and the blacks hold them in contempt for their approach to life, for remaining outside the prevalent culture, for seldom rising above their traditional status, for refusing to assume any political role or civic responsibilities. Scattered throughout the islands, their number is unknown. Um, and yeah, so Redshanks is the group's politest label, a name that goes back to auction block days when the white slaves' legs were painfully burned by the tropical sun. In Tobago, Dominica, and St. Lucia, the Redlegs are called Petite Blancs. On Kariakou in the Grenadine Islands, they are ridiculed as kayaks. And on St. Vincent, they are known as Bajons, since they were brought there from Barbados. In Barbados, so that's the main island where Rihanna is from. So there's about 500 exist today. So that was in 1973. Nowadays it's about 400. They're known as the Pur Johnnies or Pur Johnny Bakra. One Barbadian black explained this as a corruption of poor Johnny Backrow, saying that in plantation days they were not permitted to sit among aristocratic planters in church, but were relegated to back rows. However, since Bakra or Bakra was the African word for white men, the current name may also derive from that. So the Johnnies inhabited wretched huts among the high hills around Batsheba and Chalky Mount in St. Andrews and St. Joseph parishes. Some create crude pottery, throwing the clay on primitive wooden wheels and using a kiln as kiln a hole in the side of a hill covered with rocks. On Saturdays, when they come to Bridgetown to higgle their pots to tourists, their district bus is surrounded by blacks, jeering them as bottom-foot bakras. The Redlegs appear doomed as an independent culture. Malnutrition saps their energy. Alcoholism is common. They have problems with anemia, hemophilia, and epilepsy, and with very few individuals remaining in Redleg settlements, it has come down to a painful choice: emigrate or integrate. A few Redlegs have begun to intermarry, but the stern tradition still stands. So the Redlegs are virtually untouched by the economic benefits of Caribbean tourism, except for peddling some materials. But they still want to own a house just like the other ones. So this is back from the 70s. Actually, Barbados nowadays is a fairly wealthy island. I think it's like in the top 55 most wealthy nations in the world, and it's fairly like yeah, the whites, like these Redlegs, are still at the bottom though of the social status. So there are a few that have escaped and become they've joined the middle class, but the Redlegs only have contempt for the people that do, refusing to visit their businesses or even crossing the street when they see one of these new middle class people approach. So they have they're very closely knit, and they don't want people to leave their status. And they live. Most Redlegs continue to live in huts built on poles, tied with vines, and covered with broad leaves of the wild plantain. The roof thatched with bundles of straw, reminiscent of slave quarters. The huts are plastered with mud and set on small stilts off the ground to avoid dampness and crawling critters. Kitchens are separate thatched huts where eddos, tanner, dasheen, and other vegetables are heaped in the corners. Most families are too poor to keep animals, except for maybe a chicken here and there. The yard is packed dirt, carefully swept inside. Mud walls are invariably hung with photographs of Queen Elizabeth II in coronation clothing and President Kennedy and family. So anyway, this is older. And on the shelf, perhaps a single can of Libby's corned beef if company comes. The Redlegs grow their own ground provisions, mostly starchy root vegetables. They make the most of their plots, through crop rotation and terracing, and are dedicated followers of McDonald's almanac. Um, so water is toted in cookie tins, laundry is scrubbed on the rugs of streams and finished off with a charcoal burning iron. Homemade charcoal or coconut husks are used to fuel. One family proudly showed an oven fashioned from a discarded oil drum in which the mother made bread, cake, and even wedding cakes he sold off to neighbors. Um, yeah, so I'll skip some parts of the article, but they let me go back here. The Redlegs have an impressive knowledge of folk medicine and are quick to prescribe lemongrass tea for colds and bellyache balsam. Yet they lack a certain common sense about sanitation and infection, often ignoring cuts or bites on their bare feet and legs until blood poisoning sets in. Living in the hills, as most of them do, they seldom bathe in the healthful sea like other West Indians, and though dwellers of the tropics, they abhor the sun, prizing the lightness of their skin. Their illiteracy is higher than that of the islanders, which nowadays actually the literacy in on Barbados is close to 100%. So I don't know if that also includes the Redlegs. In their pride, subservience to a black teacher is despised. As for poverty, it is so general that one family sends its youngsters to school according to whose turn it is to wear the good shoes. And in another, a little girl wanted to go to school but lacked a printing lead to write with. I'm not sure what that means. um,
I
so
think
and
I think
yeah,
it means she doesn't have anything to write with, like
a
paper
pen.
or
Yeah,
pencil or pen,
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And that's for their fundamentalism. Redlegs will tell you one reason things getting mashed up on this island is people getting too much education. For all books but the Bible are designed to lead men away from God.
Hmm.
Movies, even photographs, may be considered instruments of the devil, or even dolls. Don't let your child sleep with a dolly, one man warns. That's idol worship. She should only sleep with the Holy Spirit.
Are these
Um,
guys Catholics? What
no,
denom-
no, they were stripped from their Catholic faith. So most of them were Catholics, but they weren't allowed um, to execute their color. So I think
what
they
are they?
are actually Anglicans, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know much about Anglicanism. I guess if it's English colony or was an English colony, they probably only, maybe the Anglican Church was the only thing that they had on the island. But it's interesting that they would have those kind of views because Catholicism makes heavy use of images.
Mm, yeah. I don't know if yeah.
That sounds almost like Puritans.
It sounds
They really
Puritan. Yeah.
disliked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me read the next part to you. At night, shutters are pulled tight, and cracks of the butt stuffed with rags against zombies or Walking Dead. Obeah, the black magic brought to the New World by African slaves, is feared. But it is believed that the magic of the Christian preacher can counteract any Obeah, hex, or necromancy. If your faith be strong enough, it is said you don't need doctor or even sleep.
Mm.
So these people are very, very religious. The Redleg approach to life is fatalistic. You don't know when the Lord will take you. Uh, yeah, so that's like written in the way they spoke, I guess. Um, yeah. Anyway, so they like death comes when it comes, children come when it comes. Children are prized and needed to help out. Families are large, but hostilities and petty jealousies break up families.
Hmm.
A brother was disowned because he married a black woman. Living with her was bad enough, but marrying her inside a church was unforgivable. Unforgivable. The family never mentioned his name again, and if they passed in the street, they simply failed to see him. Today, after centuries, the Redlegs still insist upon working in their own white gangs in the fields or on the roads. So, because they fear assimilation with the blacks. So some Redlegs see mass immigration as the only way they can survive as Redlegs. But the prospect is not looked upon happily. As one
You know
mother
what
said,
this you know
yeah,
what this
yeah,
reminds me of, Stilgar? It reminds me of the
no.
Kalash people in I think in Pakistan. And
Yeah, well, I mean, they're trying to survive, and this mother is talking about like when they send their kids to school, they go to Canada, England, or the U.S., and they never come back again.
well,
So
like the
yeah,
Kalash, they're an somewhat insular group. They have like an older religion that's closer to like the original form of Hinduism, and
mm-hmm.
they're a mostly white Indo-European people. In fact, like if we went there, we could blend in among them. And they're surrounded by Islam, and they're very strict. So like if one of their people converts to Islam, they're kicked out of the community. They try to kind of keep, in order to prevent from uh,
Being
dissolving
assimilated.
completely. Yeah,
Yeah.
being
I mean,
assimilated. They have very
yeah,
strict
there's
rules.
a similar example, I think, with the Yazidis in the Middle East. You know, all the ones that were taken as slaves by ISIS.
Mm.
They also have very strict, and their religion is like a mix of Islam and Zoroastrianism and Judaism, but it's different. And the only way they're still alive today is because they have very strict rules and not mingling with Islam, and like that's the only way that they're still around, because otherwise they would have just long ago been absolved into the people around them. So
Yeah, Islam has a way of destroying cultural distinctiveness. Like when it takes over an
well, they
area,
make it very hard for you to survive, and then because the men can marry your women,
you
so
can't
like
marry their women.
but you can't marry their women. So then, of course, like you end up your populations are dwindling because you're poor. Women who are looking for a man, then they'll have like richer Muslim people around them. They'll marry off potentially.
Yeah.
So then your population dwindles and dwindles until there's nothing left. Sometimes if you're a good-looking woman, you'll just be outright stolen. But I don't
Yeah.
want to get off traffic off
Off topic.
subject too much. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so the original Redlegs were the victims of political and religious persecution at home and the hunger for mass labor on the New World plantations. In the mid 1600s, sugar exports from Little Barbados were worth 5 times the exports from all of the North American colonies, and other European powers were competing with England to control and exploit this commodity. So they were worth more than whatever North America produced. So there was a lot of demand for sugar, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
because sugar can be made into so many different things. Like, it doesn't just make all the desserts taste good, but they also make rum from it. And
yeah,
what is that? Molasses, I think. Um, yeah, I mean, there's different products. Yeah,
they were
that
really
was.
really big here. I mean, cane sugar used to be the only thing, and then over here they came out with beet sugar, which is what they use nowadays. I think that broke a lot of the whole sugar trade, and because then in Europe you could grow these beets and
Mhm.
get your sugar from that, so you no longer needed to ship it from the Indies
Hmm.
or the West Indies. Um, yeah, the painful choice for the Redlegs seems to be to finally emigrate or face extinction. So, like the way that these people were shipped off um, to from Ireland and Scotland was that either they would like lose a conflict, like they were in a war, and there was a big they were getting massacred, and then the English would take prisoners of war, and then the choice was either to die in prison or to be sent off as a indentured serf, and then they would be sent to Barbados. But also there were a lot of people that were like jinxed or like duped into signing their life away. They were made like beautiful promises, like, oh yeah, you'll work for a few years, but then you'll get your own land, etc. Um, but the reality was oftentimes very different. Like an indentured serf did have some rights, but there were very few. Um, and basically, like, you were not even allowed to get pregnant for 7 years. If you were to get pregnant, you would risk getting extra years added to your service, that you would be indentured, and your child would be sold off, basically. And yeah, they would get people like from bars and stuff, and vagrants, but also like Catholic priests. Um, they would send off orphans. So a lot of like thousands and thousands, like at least 50,000, were sent off this way, and the majority of them unwillingly. And many of them didn't even make it to cross, because there was a lot of disease on the ships, etc. And like it was not uncommon for many of them to die on the way over. And then when they were there, they were often mistreated, and the promises of the free land were they would get land like that was like the worst kind of land ever. And they were punished, they were beaten. Basically, they were living in very dire circumstances. Um, so the Irish captives were barbadoed, is the saying. So and here's an example. 2 years later, 800 Scots were captured at the Battle of Worcester, were packed off, and Cromwell ordered the Scots to relinquish all vagrants for transportation. So Cromwell was the one that. Do you know Cromwell?
Yeah, I'm actually been thinking about doing a topic on Cromwell. He's considered to be a great. He was a Puritan, and he's considered to be some kind of folk hero, or he was. Maybe not anymore, but yeah, he was a reaction to. I think it was they were trying to bring England back towards Catholicism, and a lot of people got enraged by that. I mean, that's not the only thing. That's kind of an oversimplification, but yeah, I know Cromwell.
So here in the article it says, in his religious zeal, Cromwell shipped out Catholic priests and Catholic children, exclaiming, "We must clear England of this pollution." In 1 year, in one 4-year period, 6,400 white slaves were rounded up in Ireland and Scotland. Even now these times are remembered in Ireland, for the cruelest words of an Irish peasant can spit at his enemies are, "The curse, O Cromwell, on ye." Okay. In 1661, the Council for Foreign Plantation decided that felons condemned for small offences and sturdy beggars should be sent to the West Indies, and at 55 shillings per man, the gaolers of Newgate and Bridewell were pleased to release them. It is impossible to estimate how many were actually shipped out, although from 1654 to 1685, for example, some 10,000 sailed from Bristol alone. So it's well, now I read somewhere else 50,000, but it's probably a lot more. After each political turnover, until the practice was abolished in 1833, shiploads of prisoners and convicts were sent to the West Indies, each wearing a bill of lading declaring this merchandise an act of God or traitor to the king. Nice. The greatest mass deportation took place as an epilogue to some of the darkest pages of British history. The bloody assages, trials and executions held at Dorchester in 1685. Those not sentenced to death were barbadoed from England forever. So there were some free willers. They sold themselves to a colonial company for 5 to 7 years in exchange for transportation and a portion of land and a small sum of money after they were freed from bondage. What they didn't bargain for was the blistering sun, the tropical fevers, and the master's broken promises, often at the end of their term. the master would find some legal pretext to keep them on. Another source of labor for the colonies were orphans, who were indentured to anyone who would pay passage and bound to servitude until they came of age. All in all, the flesh trade was so lucrative that agents resorted to any means to secure bodies. Spiriting became a sport for ruthless seamen, especially along the Scottish and Irish coasts. Young men were lured into alehouses for a drink and then spirited away. Well, spirited is between brackets or exclamation marks, so I guess they got them drunk and then they would kidnap them.
Well, it's like it means people are taken away, basically. There's
Yeah.
actually some anime called Spirited Away.
Yeah,
So,
I know. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it does have something to do with alcohol, because alcohol are called spirits sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
could
Others,
be.
sometimes whole families were kidnapped. So many children disappeared that the City Council of London finally condemned the practice of children stealing and
Man,
passed an act making spiriting punishable by death.
it should be. And imagine
The
if somebody took your kids, like your kids are just playing outside. I don't let my kids play outside unless I'm there with them, or my wife is there, somebody. Because I kind of think we're getting back to this, actually. Of course, now I'd say they're taking kids for different reasons.
Yeah.
Not gonna say
Oh,
overtly what that
and
is.
some of this is still also helping with like Filipinos and stuff that go to Saudi Arabia and they're promised a job, and then when they get there, they take their passport. It's usually women, and then like they get abused and like horribly treated, and basically they get treated by slaves, and they're not let go, so they're stuck in the country. So I mean, some of this is still going on. Um,
In
Although
Saudi
nowadays,
Arabia, slavery is legal.
and no, I think the English abolished it in like.
Nah, man, it's still legal in Saudi Arabia. You can look it
Oh,
up.
I thought the English abolished it in like 1965, or like they made them cancel it. But
Maybe they canceled it at some point, but I'm pretty sure it's still going on. There was an incident a few years ago where there's some Saudi Arabian couple, it's like a husband and his wife here in the United States, and they were actually keeping this woman in their house as a house slave. She was either Filipino or Indonesian. But of
yeah,
course, slavery is illegal here, even though we're moving back towards it. But for now,
it's
officially,
illegal in these countries
it's
too,
not
except for
illegal, dude. It's in Saudi Arabia and in a lot of these other Muslim countries, they still have actual slavery.
they have it, but it's officially it's not legal.
All right,
It's
well,
like,
let's.
but did you know, for example, that marijuana in the Netherlands is illegal? But then again, you can just buy it anywhere and smoke it. What we have is that it's called a gedoogbeleid. It's like you allow it to happen. I think it's similar to that. Like you'll have certain laws, but if nobody actually executes the laws, by factum, like those laws they're mute. They're void. They don't do anything. So, but
I
yeah.
think it's
Anyway,
still going on. Okay, here. All
yeah,
right,
it's
here's
going
some.
on, but it's not legal. I'm telling you, dude.
Okay, it says. All right, so slavery was officially abolished in 1962 in Saudi
I told
Arabia.
you. Yeah, by
All right, here.
pressure, by under pressure of the British actually, because the British they did a lot to. Well, I mean they had a lot of slaves and slavery going on, but they when when the movement started to abolish slavery, um, the after that the English did a lot to, or the British Empire did a lot to abolish it worldwide. So,
Yeah, they abolished it in all their holdings. They
but yeah,
didn't. They didn't
I'm
abolish
sure
it in. Yeah.
I'm sure it will come back, and it's already back in places like Libya, but in other places like in Saudi Arabia, but also in other you'll see that it exists, even though it's not legal. And actually, what made me interested in this, and I want to do a topic on this. Like I did a topic about white slavery from the perspective of all the people that were sold and stolen by the Ottomans
Mhm.
and the Barbary pirates, millions of people. um, and also like a lot of Spanish people, like entire cities were vanquished and deported into slavery. But there's another form of white slavery that existed for a long time, and that was uh, just the slavery of poor whites. And I read a book about it from a Norwegian book about that Norway is rich now, right? It's a rich country. They have a lot of oil. But for the longest time, Norway was extremely poor. And what happened was that a lot of women, Norwegian women, were like extremely desired because they're blonde, blue eyes, beautiful. And what they would do is like there were all these yeah, well, people going out like, yeah, we have a contract for you, and like you'll be like a helping out as an au pair in this household, and you know the mother there, she is like half Norwegian, so she wants her kids to learn Norwegian, stuff like that. And you know, just sign this contract. And basically, what they would do is they would sign themselves into slavery or into servitude. And these people would then be shanghaied or barbadoed onto a ship. Many of them would end up in whorehouses all over Europe, the Ottoman Empire, but also the Americas. And this was thousands of Norwegian girls or women that were like that like would disappear into whorehouses all over the world. And there's this book I read. It has many testaments of women that would end up like in the Amsterdam brothel. One of them was lucky enough that her fiance was able to get her out because he thought it was fishy, and he did some more research and was able to find out where she lived or where they were keeping her behind bars, mind you. Um, but yeah, there was a whole trade of, and there's of course there's still some trade going on today in like sex world, and like you know, like if you look at prostitutes and stuff, there are still stuff where back then they would get them hooked on drugs as fast as possible, because then they could, you know, enjoy them, like use them for as much as possible, control them. And some of that stuff is still there today. Um, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of people that are living in the new world, or you know, like we're not all of us, or not everybody that's white has this privileged background, which I think this whole thing about repatriations is so ridiculous, because there are quite a few white people that actually uh, don't have a privileged background. They come back from indenture, you know, as indentured servitude, or like extreme poverty, or like a lot of this is really really terrible backgrounds, and it makes no sense to punish, you know, their descendants like 300 years later for some privilege that they never had.
Yeah.
It makes zero sense. But anyway, that was part of the reason. But it's just so, I think that whole discussion is so crazy, because people forget, like they always think that like oh, people just came to the US, or they just came to the new world, and they were just so rich, and they were all like this English aristocrats, just walked off the ship and that owned tons of slaves and whatnot. No. They're the majority people never owned any slaves,
Right.
and some of them, uh, you know, they lived under the most horrible circumstances, and you know, so were starving to death, freezing to death, being worked to death. It makes no sense. Like
Yeah.
logically, it makes no sense. So
And a lot of the early English settlers that came here, that were coming not as indentured servants or anything like that, but even the guys that came as free men, a lot of them just died. Like it took the English a while to establish colonies here, because the thing is, the climate is different, and nothing is built here. It was all wilderness, and it's far away from England. You know, like if something happens to England, let's say, Well, they could still buy stuff from the mainland. They're, they're going to be able to get help and stuff, but over here it's much more serious. So actually, a lot of people died, and then indentured servitude came, and a lot of those guys died as well. And the thing about slavery, like eventually we did have slavery in some parts of the country where it was used for the production of cash crops, things like cotton and sugar and indigo, that kind of stuff. But the thing about slavery is the way they modeled those plantations here is similar to how serfdom was set up over in Europe. So, like Elon Musk, he said something in an interview that if you go back far enough, everybody has slavery in their ancestry somewhere. It's just that for some people, it goes back much further than others. And, we actually got put through feudalism for at least 1,000 years, where you're living on some small little rubbish house on somebody else's land, and everything you grow and produce, that guy takes a cut of it, and no matter how much you produce, you'll never own that house or that land that you're working on. And that's also one of the push factors that caused people to leave Europe and come to the United States, because even when feudalism was officially abolished, it still kind of persisted in some form, because
Yeah,
for
but
most of Europe.
even in the States, it continued. Like a lot of these mills and stuff that you had, like in places like North Carolina,
Mm,
like you had the workers working in the mill, but
yeah,
they weren't paid in using real money. They were paid in like um, what do you call it? Like
yeah, the fake company money, but
company
that's
money. Yeah, like you could
yeah,
only spend it with the company. Like they would make sure that these people would never break out of poverty, so they would always be indentured to the company.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
mean,
I
it's
mean,
it's it's repeating patterns, but like
and
one of
and
the
I actually
things
think
that
that I actually think this stuff is gonna come back at some point. I think
it
we're
is
gonna.
coming
This is
back.
what they want, but
Yeah.
the whole thing is like, oh, let's just find like somebody to hate on, and I think right now it's like white people. Like it's okay to hate white people for whatever reason, which
Well,
I
there's
think I
some
think
people.
racism is bad either way, and like, and plus, and then if you start hating people for things that happened like thousands, or hundreds of years ago, like as a Dutch person, should I be hating the? There's a lot of people I should be hating for what they've done to my ancestors, but like let's say the Germans. That was like not that long ago. Actually, I know people that had German soldiers stationed in their house.
Didn't they
I
also
know, I know
carpet
people
bomb?
that were bombed, and they remember that their house was being bombed because of the Germans. Should they hate Germans? It doesn't make, at some point, I think it makes like, to how far back does the hate go? Like, because these people don't even hate Germans, and they were there in the war. But like, you can go back and there's a lot of it. Like the French were here. I mean, like the Romans enslaved us. Like, I don't know. Like,
So
there's a lot of it. It doesn't. For me, it makes no sense to say, well, because yeah, and I do know that the whole thing of like saying like, okay, because these people were black, now it's okay to, that's disgusting to me. Um, but anyway, I just want to continue with this story,
oh,
and finish it because so yeah, although I don't want to use this as to say, well, because they had it just as bad. It's like, no, they probably, like, they didn't have it as bad, and it's not about that. It's not about comparing. It's just about saying that like a lot of people's had rough backgrounds. Maybe not as bad, and actually sometimes here we had some conversations with some of the loudest people here in the country. One of the loudest persons here talking about racism, turns out that actually his ancestors were slave owners in, I think it was Kenya or something like that. So some, like, even though he's black, like turns out his family goes back to black slave owners, and he's always complaining here about the horrible whites.
Yeah, actually,
Which makes like
Kamala.
that's just disgusting because I mean it's you're just creating more hatred for no reason and
Well, if
there's
if
so
he
yeah.
hates white people so much, why is he there? Who made him come? Like it's
Yeah, and probably if his ancestors hadn't been slave traders, never would have had the money to come here because anyway, yeah,
like in America,
you
it's different
yeah.
because we were never like we were never a racially homogenous country or a primordial ethnicity like say Germans, for example. Like we always had some amount of Native Americans. You know, they were here first, and then the most of the Black Americans are descended from people who were mostly brought here against their will. I mean, that's not absolute, but I mean, those people, yeah, their ancestors did not come voluntarily. But if you come voluntarily, you should just keep your mouth shut. If you don't like the country, go to another one that you do like. And even, honestly, even for people that didn't come here voluntarily, I think a lot of the race mongering stuff, it really is just a scam. It's a excuse
It is a scam.
for
It's and you know what? It's the elite, and they are the ones they're using it as a tool.
Yeah, because if they're going to take away
It
money from one group to give to another, which is
yeah,
what they say they want to do,
and
they're going to
it's just
pocket at least they're going to
and,
pocket a lot of that money.
yeah. And
Like
how are
it's
they going
going
to
to
do that?
them first
Yeah,
before they
of
hand it
course,
out.
because the only way you can do it is by giving control to them, and then they can take the money, and then they can take, like and it's a nice diversion from distraction from what's really happening. So
Yeah, their real goal is to take money. It's not any kind of moral outrage on their part or a moral imperative. It's just an excuse for them to keep looting and pillaging the country, which is what
yeah,
they
and take more power as well. So it's like,
yeah.
yeah, we're gonna make things more equal. Just give us all the power, and
Yeah, they'll make everybody equal in poverty except for themselves. They'll be like living in
and a few
big
lucky ones.
mansions while we live in like
Yeah.
huts.
Anyway, let's finish the story. So the voyages to the West Indies were nightmare journeys, according to contemporary accounts. Children under the age of 8 seldom survived them. Indeed, probably a quarter of the passengers died at sea. A carpenter sentenced to Jamaica in 1685 wrote, "Ship was soon infected with grievous and contagious diseases as smallpox, fever, and the plague, with frightful blotches. Others were devoured with lice till they were almost at death's door." So that's what we talked about recently with my topic on like the how it was like for traveling to the Indies as a sailor. For most, life was little better on land. The white slaves were ostracized by both planters and black slaves. The planters looked upon them as enemies of the government or convicts. The black slaves, handpicked as a lifetime investment, observed that if these whites were not worthy of massa's respect, then they must surely be despicable souls. I guess it means masters. Okay. Some of the whites escaped into piracy. Most, however, learned to live lives of apathetic resignation through centuries of persecution. This resignation persists today as its chief characteristic of the Redlegs. Descendants of slaves and indentured servants, the Redlegs of the British West Indies have never assimilated and now occupy the bottom rung of the socio-economic ladder in the Caribbean. So yeah, it's actually a place where probably the only place where whites are socially and economically below the black population, which is actually
Isn't
doing.
it also like that in South Africa though, with white people there?
No, because in South Africa there are a lot of farm owners, and I think a lot of them are white. Um, but that's a whole different discussion. I think anyway, it's a very different situation than here because the most people that went there by choice.
Mm.
Most of them were farmers. And then there's a whole lot of discussion going on. I think that we should do a topic on that. That is a place where if the ANZ, I think, will soon lose, and then a more radical party will come into play, where they will really need to. We could have a new Rwanda type situation happening in South Africa with I think there's only 4 million white people left in there. So yeah,
I
yeah.
wouldn't live in that country under any
No,
circumstances.
but I mean, if, people live there their entire lives. Yeah,
It's not a
and
nice
also like
country.
it's also a place where they could have held on to apartheid if they wanted to. They didn't. It was a country with nuclear weapons back in the day. They gave up their nukes voluntarily.
Hmm.
Um, so they decided that they wanted to end this. Um, of course, there was a lot of pressure on them. Well, that's right. And apartheid was horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But to now come up with like a form of reverse racism, there's a lot of stuff going on there as well. Like at some point we should do a topic about like what the country was like when the whites arrived there, because there was almost nobody living there. Like a lot of the people that are there like today are like the black people as well are themselves immigrants as well. Just
Yeah, I heard the
not
original
from a different.
population
Yeah,
was
yeah,
actually Khoisan people, and like the white and the black replaced them as the dominant. Like they like neither group is actually indigenous. It's actually the Khoisan, which are somewhat Asiatic looking, actually. So
yeah. So yeah, that was my topic for today. I had known of the rednecks, but
hmm.
I read this book about with this fictional character, and she talked about, yeah, I'm actually a red leg in their background. So I thought that was interesting. Um, I thought it was interesting to learn more about it and learn a little bit more about Barbados, which actually sounds like an interesting place to visit someday. One of the most densely populated islands in the world.
Hmm.
Um, with about 250,000 people, so not very very big.
But there's only
Yeah,
about 400 of these people left out of
yeah,
and 50,000 over 50,000 came, but
yeah.
only
Some of them
4.
moved to other countries, and a lot of them left for like the U.S. and other places like that. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
probably better to
right
just.
now I think only a few percent of Barbados is white, and yeah,
It
so
seems like I've looked at I've looked at where looking at who lives in different parts of the world, and during the 1700s and 1800s, European powers certainly conquered and ruled over huge parts of the world. I mean, you think about it, between England and Spain and Portugal, the whole New World was under the foot, and also France, of European powers. But there were some places that Europeans settled in large numbers, and other places they did not. Like United States and Canada, we pretty much replaced the original population, to the point where they were like 1%. But and then in Argentina, which is all the way down at the South America, it is also like, I think, over 80% white to this day. But then Central America, it's still overwhelmingly native, and it seems the case in those tropical islands. It's either native or mostly sub-Saharan African derived type population, and it looks to me like the tropics is not a place where Europeans want to live or can live. And like the thing about having red legs, I have had that happen to me many, many times. It does look almost as red as blood. And, people have asked me in the comments asking about my background and stuff. And I'm like on my mom's side, I am almost half Irish genetically, not culturally, of course, but it really does make a difference when you go out in the sun. Like it doesn't take that long to get a serious burn. And man, I would hate to live in the sun too. I don't think it has avoiding the sun doesn't have so much to do about wanting to stay as light as you can, but trying to not be destroyed by it, because sunburn is no joke. Like it hurts, and then for me, the itching that comes after the hurt, like when the outer layers of skin have died and it's kind of disconnecting, from the living skin beneath, that itches like crazy. And then if you do it enough times, you can get skin cancer. So I kind of think that Irish are the white people of the white people, and definitely, don't want to take the sun. Even Spain, like they really didn't want to go to Central America. They're more kind of Southern Europeans, but I think Guatemala is something like 90% indigenous. So yeah, it's just kind of, and of course, we didn't really establish big, huge, permanent footholds in the tropics of Africa either. So, I mean, from my personal view, it's not at all a place that I would want to live, either the desert or the tropics. But it seems like it's more than just me. Like maybe we're just not cut out for those kind of climates too.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, imagine
Most of these people were just shipped off wherever they were shipped off to, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't have a choice, but I mean, I know quite a bit about what happens being in the sun.
Well, I think they just needed a lot of people there because of the plantations, and I think the labor with the grass, or what do you call it, the cane, the sugar cane, is very
just
manual.
being out there for like 10 minutes in that kind of sunlight is enough to do it for a lot of people. And actually, redneck, the term, also has to do with people that are working out in the sun in the area between where the shirt ends and between where the hair starts, gets turned extremely red. And the connotation there was that this person works outside or spends a lot of time outside, basically.
Yeah, that's usually a white skin color. Like even in Japan, they had the same thing. Like if you're fair white skin, it shows off that you're rich enough that you don't have to work in the field. And that was also the case in like Victorian England. Like the laborers would have to go outside, and then they would get tanned. So the whiter you were, the richer you, like the more you could show off your wealth. And later on, it flipped because like it was a way to show. Like when I grew up over here in the Netherlands in the 90s and 80s, it was a way to show that you had money to go on vacation to like southern Italy or France. So if you would come back after vacation, and you would have a nice tan, that would be a way to show off your wealth. And I think you still have that today. Or even for winter sport, if you went to Austria, then there's a lot of sun when you go skiing. You also sit outside, in the sun. It's actually very nice, even though I don't know how that works, but it's like freezing. But you sit in the sun, it's super warm. But you come back, and then you're like nice and tan, and you can show off that you have money enough to go on winter sports vacation. So
back in the 90s, it was similar here. Like people would deliberately tan on purpose. And Mad TV, they made some jokes about it and such, but it had to do with, the impression was that you could go to the beach and sit around there, or you could go to the lake. But now I haven't seen anybody, it's not talked about, and I don't really see people doing it. But also the demographics have changed so much that that's probably not.
It's also a lot more awareness around skin cancer and things like that. So.
There's also that too, yeah.
When you go to the old people's home, you still see a lot of the old guard. Whenever it's sunny out here, they all sit outside in the sun, try to bake a little. Yeah.
Not me.
But anyway, with that, I want to close off my topic for today. And like, share, subscribe. Leave us a comment if you like our ranting. Yeah, put your rants. If you have your favorite rants, put it in the comments. If you're still here today, let us know if you're still here at the end. Yeah, just put
Yeah.
something out. Yeah. Anyway, Ivor, sorry. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and let's see you next time.
All right.